We did yesterday 19.8, and we said we're going to come back and revisit it. So let's review. Kone lev ohev nafsho, shomer tevuna limso tov. One who acquires we really went with mind. So one who acquires a mind, or we didn't go with mind, but what we went with was closest to mind. One who acquires a mind loves his soul. Shomer tevuna limso tov. He guards understanding to find good. So my interpretation was that these are the two steps to successful I was going to say successful thinking, but really the way we were learning it is successful development of intellectual perfection. So step one is, so you only develop intellectual perfection through each and every instance of gaining knowledge. And the gaining of knowledge involves two steps. One is gathering the knowledge itself, or the facts. That's kone lev. And then the other one is being vigilant to guard your process of understanding from what do you call it? From mistakes and errors and fallacies and all that stuff. So if you do that, so then there's going to be two things that are going to happen. One is that you will improve your soul, which is your rationality or your ability to think. And then the other one is that you're going to get better results. And that's the limso tov. So I was learning that it's not, this is one of these ones where it's not kone lev specifically is ohev nafsho and shomer tevuna specifically is limso tov, but rather kone lev v'shomer tevua ohev nafsho limso tov.
It all comes together.
It all comes together, right? Like and then if you doubt my reading of that, then just look at the Meiri on 10.1. That's the place where the Meiri talks about it. Other people talk about it also. Okay, yeah.
Ohev nafsho is that you're going to be able, in the future, you will be able to make better decisions?
Yeah, so I actually, the way I was looking at it is the better decisions is really emphasized by the limso tov,
okay.
And then the improving the faculty of the soul is ohev nafsho.
Okay, and that's good in a Mishlei.
That's good in a Mishlei sense because ultimately it is going to lead to better decisions, but I think it's good in a Mishlei sense because like Mishlei is acknowledging still the fact that like the seichel is the essence of who you are. It's just that the way it's motivating you to do that is through the decision making,
okay.
But perceiving reality is a plus. Yeah, yeah. I was gonna say one more thing also. Yeah. Oh, I was gonna say, remind me at the end of shiur. I have a question from my English class about deductive and inductive thinking that I just kind of want to run by you, and it just happened to relate to the pasuk. So, yeah. Okay. All right. So that was my interpretation. Isaac, you want to say yours?
That a person who's acquiring knowledge, is benefiting himself, but he has to incorporate it into his thinking in order to find good.
And that's the shmira.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good. And I don't remember David's. What was David's?
I think it was about creating a life of learning.
Yes. Right. And what did he say? I don't remember either. Yeah. There's a certain critical mass of sometimes I find with if you have a couple approaches to the pasuk that are prominent in your mind, then it crowds out the ability to retain other ones, and they all just kind of get folded into that one.
Right.
Okay. So we noted that Rabbeinu Yonah took a completely different approach than all the other Mefarshim, and that's what we wanted to look at today. So Rabbeinu,
what's this going to crowd at?
What was that?
I said, what's this going to crowd at?
It's a fresh day. All right. Rabbeinu Yonah says, we're going to read the whole thing again. Kone lev ohev nafsho, lefi shehizkir inyan hachanufa, v'amar meradif amarim, since it mentioned the matter of flattery, saying that he pursues them with statements. Ba lahaz here al kinyan hamidos tovos. It's such a loose connection, isn't it? I mean, chanufa is a very, very particular bad midah that was only part of the last idea, and saying since it did that, then it's coming to warn you about acquiring good middos. I really do think. I think you said it. One of you said it last at some point about it is reminiscent of the Rambam and the Sefer HaMitzvos, where it's associative in terms of its sequencing. I think it's a stretch to say that he really holds that this is an essential idea, or that Davka Shlomo had to speak about this after the first topic. I think he's just trying to explain the flow. It is an interesting question, by the way. We saw that who said this? I think most recently I quoted the Ibn Kaspi saying that there's no order in Mishlei and you shouldn't darshan smuchim, you shouldn't like explain juxtapositions. It's interesting the fact that Rabbeinu Yonah does. I wonder what that reflects, like what that machlokess stems from, about whether like again, like this thing is so weak. I mean, like oh, I think I just have an answer. Not for this one. Okay, so the question is, I'm just gonna talk it out. Question is like, the Ibn Kaspi says, since the style of Proverbs is just a collection of stuff, and Shlomo didn't even arrange them, so then there's no point in explaining why one pasuk is next to the other, unless, of course, like it's part of the same, sequence of ideas. So the question is, what is Rabbeinu Yonah getting at by doing this? That's the question. Yeah. So I have an idea, but anyone have a theory?
I mean, it's possible he wants to display it as like he wants to show that Mishlei is like a unified book. Like it's not like.
But if the unity is real, then I can see why he would want to do it. Yeah. But if he I guess I'm kind of working with the assumption here, and maybe someone could challenge me on this, but I'm working with the assumption that he agrees with the Ibn Kaspi in the sense that there is no order, and yet he still is engaging in these drushos of the smuchin.
Oh, you're saying it's more of a drush.
Yeah. I think it'd be a huge machlokess to say that he holds that there is an order, and maybe the person could say that. I just don't think that stands to reason.
Well, I mean, maybe he just holds it's an associative order, and there's no point. Let Ibn Kaspi holds there's no point in trying to get an idea out of that association.
Right.
That's not telling you anything about the essential idea. It's
right.
just that it's just connections in terms of like how to order them, I guess.
Right.
But the Rabbeinu Yonah is saying that you can't. There are ideas to be gained from that, the association of.
So is that the machlokess? Is are there ideas or not ideas?
I don't know. No.
Because I feel like the threshold the bar for the quality of the ideas is so low in Rabbeinu Yonah that like it's really hard to say that even Kaspi would like not come up with stuff like that. You know, I mean, in other words, he holds that. Again, I don't know how much we can actually define a machlokess. I just want to know what Rabbeinu Yonah holds. You know, but
right.
What were you thinking?
So what it reminds me of is like how we say that, it reminds me of what we've been doing with Avram ben Ramam on Chumash methodology, that like, you know, that Chazal will give, what was this? This is his fourth category, is Chazal will give ideas in the style of interpretations, but they never really intended to be interpretations. Like there's this whole genre of midrashim where they will explain a pasuk, but they'll basically just use the words in the pasuk as a platform for saying ideas that are not actually, they never intended that this is the pshat of the pasuk or that this is what God wanted to convey. It's just that they're using the pasuk as a basis. And he didn't say why. I mean, he said it was just like a melitza thing, like a poetic thing. But like I've said in the past, and this makes sense to me, is that before the writing of Torah Sheba'al Peh, then the text that you had was the Torah Shebechsav, and like the more ideas you can associate to the text, the better. Okay, so Mishlei is definitely meant, even though it's Torah Shebechsav, it's meant to be Baal Peh. It's meant to be proverbs. That's what proverbs are. Is like you remember them and you say them. You know, so Rabbeinu Yonah's primary mission is to explain what the proverb means. However, if you're reading it in a book form and you can layer on any additional ideational content, then that just gets more mileage out of the proverb, you know? So like you'll say the proverb, but then if you remember what came before it, you'll get this additional idea and it'll strengthen either it's an additional idea. Sometimes he does additional ideas like that come from the smichus, that come from the juxtaposition. Sometimes here it's just associating the two ideas, which is like, I guess in modern terms, we would say like strengthening or broadening the neural network, you know, of like when you think of poverty and how you have flattery, because Rabbeinu Yonah said this here, you're going to associate to Middos and importance of Middos, you know? So just the more ideational content he can cram into this, the better, because it just gets more out of the proverb, which you're already remembering and you're already studying in a sequence, you know? So it's not a real drasha in the sense that he doesn't hold that Shlomo Melech planned this. He doesn't hold that it's teaching you these ideas. It's just and it might be for mnemonic purposes, but I think primarily it's for just getting more insight out of what you already have been working on in the sequence that you've been working on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's weird. It's not how we usually think of like a pair.
No, it's not. And I think that, again, I don't know if we could define the commentary or the machlokess, but I think that the reason why Ibn Kaspi doesn't bother to do that, I mean, one reason is he just clearly doesn't hold it as valuable. Like there's just he doesn't hold it valuable enough to write, whether that's like an editorial decision or like a wasting time thinking about a decision. That's why I'm saying I don't know if I can define the machlokess, but like, yeah, you wouldn't ordinarily do this. But another place where you see people do this, I guess you see people do this is in Parshios in the Torah that seem to be disconnected. Now there you can argue it's an intrinsic thing because it's because God is the one who arranged them, but it is kind of speculative in the same way. Like, why is Parshas Tzitzis right before Parshas Korach, and so like, you can say that when Chazal give the explanation there or things like that, then they're actually like uncovering an underlying like conceptual unity. Or you can say that this is a question and that the Torah will sometimes jump from one narrative to another, but you now have a choice. You either let that spot lie fallow with nothing to say, or you come up with a drasha that weaves them together with an idea, even though that's not the idea that it's teaching. Yeah.
Is it usually a totally unrelated idea to the pesukim, let's say?
In Torah or in Mishlei?
I guess, I don't know, I guess Torah.
Because in Torah, I think sometimes it is like that, like with the, I can think of two examples and I'm sure there's much more than this, but two categorical categories of these types of smichus. One is in like stories, where let's say, especially when they're out of chronological order, let's say like Yehuda and Tamar, I think is just not in chronological order to the whole saga of Yosef that's being talked about, So the question is, well, why did the Torah place this here, and so like, that's one category. And a person could just, you could just say that like, these two stories are unrelated. You could say that there's nothing like inherently wrong with that. And then the other one is in lists of like halachic topics. Let's say like in Parshas Kedoshim, we have, or Mishpatim, where you have tons of mitzvos, you'll see the Mefarshim like explain why two mitzvos are why one follows the other, and like the mind does crave a unity in both cases, different kind of unity, What was the particular question you just asked? That
does it have something to do with the actual ideas of the?
Oh yeah, right. So those are two drachim in giving these explanations. Is sometimes they will say that, and sometimes it's just a very, very loose thing, Like let's say, for example, one that's in the mitzvos, I think, is, if I remember correctly, the doesn't it go Yifas Toar and then like the loved wife and the hated wife, and then Ben Sora or More or something like that, And then they explain how like, if you have like this hasty, impulsive, instinctual merit-based marriage, that's going to lead to like not good relationships with your wives, and then that's going to lead to like bad parenting, and that's going to lead to bad, It's like that is related to the ideas. Then sometimes it's just like, let's say like Lo sita lecha asherah kol eitz etel mizbach Hashem Elokecha or something like that, and then the other one is about a dayan, and then it compares like a dayan who's not proper to like an asherah. I think that one's more poetic. I don't think that one's like an intrinsic relationship between avodah zarah of asherah and like dayanos, Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Anyway, that's a nice little methodological detour. Okay. So anyway, he says. So it's coming to warn us about the acquisition of good middos. V'amar ki mi she'ohev nafsho, it says someone who loves his soul, koneh hamidos hatovos, will acquire good middos. Ki malas hanefesh lefi midosah, because the stature or virtue or level of the soul is in accordance with its middos. The kinyan halev hu kinyan hamidos, and the acquisition of heart is the acquisition of middos. And by the way, as it says, one who listens to rebuke acquires a heart. So first of all, the textual proof he gives, their leiv seemingly does not mean da'as or chachma or bina, right? When you listen to rebuke, you're getting middos, or you're at least getting things that affect your actions. You're not getting like intellectual knowledge,
Right.
But then regarding the kinyan lev being kinyan middos, I saw an interesting thing. I actually meant to print this out, but I forgot. So live with it. Hold on, let me share it. I'm sharing the screen already. So in Pirkei Avos, I think I mentioned this yesterday. In Pirkei Avos, when they have the debate between the 5 students of what's his name, about what's the path that a person, not the path that a person should choose. Hold on, what's the lashon? Ezoderek Yashar Sheyedvak Bah Adam. So what's the good path that a person should choose? So you have Rabbi Eliezer Omer Ayin Tova, which is okay. Well, we won't go into all of them. Ayin Tova, Rabbi Yeshua Omer Chaver Tov, Rabbi Yossi Omer Shachin Tov, Rabbi Shimon Omer Haroes Anolad, and then Rabbi Eliezer Omer Leiv Tov. Okay, so Rabbeinu Yonah has a lot of stuff on this, and he.
Wait, sorry, this is
Sorry, what?
This is what?
Pirkei Avos 2:9.
Oh yeah,
about the upright path that a person should cling to.
Okay.
So Rabbeinu Yonah explains the Mishnah as if you had to choose one midah, like one character trait, then he says, hold on a second. I thought he explained this. Am I misremembering? Hold on. Yeah, I think why am I not finding the, hold on. Maybe he says it earlier. I thought he explained it that the Mishnah is about, there are a lot of middos to work on. So like if you could work on one, which one should you is the best to invest your time in? So he gives hold on. B'chol hamiddos hatovos v'hayisharos yesh l'adam lidag b'behem ratzon lidag b'mida achas lihios shalem ba. If you could perfect one midah, what would it be? Ki tov l'adam lechos b'mida achas b'shleimus v'nakel elav lahasig mimena el kol hamiddos hachashuvos miyosef ben kama middos ve'einenu shalem ba'achas. Man, better for you to work on one midah and perfect it than to work on a bunch of them and like not get them perfected. And so he goes through and explains each of the middos, but then when he gets to Leiv Tov, he first gives another person's explanation and then says it doesn't work out according to his derech. But the explanation he gives is from the Rambam. He says, Rambam Zal Pirish, Shazohi Malas. So what is Leiv Tov? Zohi Malas Tikkun Hamidos. So Leiv Tov means perfection of midos per se. Lafish Deosav Sha'adam Nova Os Mina Leiv, because a person's deos, which here I think since he's using the words midos and deos, I think deos here he means ideas. Person's ideas or knowledge flows from the leiv, from the heart. Ubizman shalibo tov kol midos av yesharos v'deos av nechonos. And when a person's heart is good, all of his midos are upright and his ideas are firm or are valid. V'nimsa, and consequently, sameach b'chalko u'mischaber imotovim v'ino chavitz ela b'davar sheish bo to'elas v'lo have said, and then he'll get all of the other 4 midos that the other people mentioned. V'chein kasav haramazal, and the Ramah also wrote this. The Yad Ramah, not the Rav Moshe Isles. The Amnam ki adavar kain hu k'divrehim ach ein hapirsh misyashu l'fi darkeinu. He says that works out according to them, but not according to our derech, which is picking one midah. You can't say one midah is like perfect all your midas, So I just want to quote that because the Rabbeinu Yonah here is saying that like perfection of midos is important because it he's saying in the name of the Rambam that it affects your ideas, So I think based on that, then when Rabbeinu Yonah here in our pasuk says malas hanefesh lafi midosaha, I think that's what he meant. Or when he says mish ohev nafsho kone midos hatovos, I think nefesh here means your knowledge or your rationality, whatever you want to say, and then perfection of midos is good for that. So I think that's how he's saying ohev nafsho. Yeah. Okay. So then, and I want to figure that out, but let's read the whole Rabbeinu Yonah. Shomer tvuna limtzot tov. He guards understanding to find good. Kasher yisbonin belibo al davar tvuna. When a person is, contemplates in his heart on a matter of understanding, v'chadish davar tov, and he innovates, he comes up with a new good idea or good principle. Oh, yishma enol mizulasa, or he hears it from someone else, which is interesting because I guess he's saying tvuna could either mean a chiddush that you came up with or a chiddush that someone else came up with. I don't think he means hearing any good idea from someone else, because then how can it say shomer tevuna, Yishmerenu, he should guard it. V'yasim hadavar al libo, and place the matter on his heart. V'yishkot al zechiraso, and be diligent in remembering it. Lahotzio el maasehu, to bring it forth in action. And through this path, a person will acquire good middos and find good. So the question here is, what's the relationship between the two halves of the pasuk, according to Rabbeinu Yonah? Because on the surface, if you just gave me his explanation of Shomer Tivuna Limso Tov, I would just say that like that's a completely unrelated idea. That if someone tells you something, first of all, if someone tells you a matter of Tivuna, why does that warrant a special type of shmira to bring it into action? Like he's speaking about it as though like if someone tells you a chiddush, like, you know, guard it and like remember it to enact it. Well, I mean, isn't that true for all knowledge, all ideas, you know? So that's like one question. But then he says at the end, min haderach hazeh yikneh adam hamidos hatovos v'im satov. Sounds like he's saying through the path of shomer tivuna, then you're going to get this kinyan leiv. So the first half of the pasuk is telling you acquire good middos because that's good for your soul, and then the way to acquire good middos is to be shomer tivuna. So how does that work? And if we want, we can also explore the idea of like how do middos improve your soul. I debated whether or not to take a couple of days to go into that topic, and I realized it was a couple day topic. I don't want to do that, but like Rabbeinu Yonah talks about it a lot in the beginning of Mishlei, and Meiri also has a thing on it, and Rambam also has a thing. I mean, it's like obviously a big theme of like, you know, there's two Mishnayos and Pirkei Avos about how you koshi years cheto kodemes l'chachmaso miskayemes. You know, anyone whose fear of sin precedes their chachma, then their chachma will last. And I'm sure there's Rabbeinu Yonah on that, but you know, we should at least get a basic idea of it here. I'm more curious about the second half, Shomer Tivuna. And again, why the focus on Tivuna? Especially if it's not your own Tivuna. Like it's your own Tivuna, or if you hear it from someone else. Like
I thought that isn't that not what Tivuna? I thought Tivuna
that's what I was saying. Is like Tivuna receives knowledge as Chachma.
Right.
And you know, so that's what I'm saying. He has to mean here that Tivuna is a certain type of idea, and that in one framework, if you hear an idea from someone else, it's automatically chachma because it's from someone else. But here he's clearly saying a Tivuna quality idea, doesn't matter where it came from, that has its own like characteristics.
And why you need shmira for that.
And why you need shmira, right? More so than other stuff, or not that you need shmira more than other stuff, but why does shmira of Tivuna lead to this kinyan hamiddos, whereas shmira of like other stuff doesn't? This really, I think, does relate to what you were saying. You want to elaborate?
Well, I was just going to make an observation.
Okay, go ahead.
Which is that if someone says an insight about something,
Yeah.
then if you forget it, it's not going to be easy to like get it back. Because you're going to have to like find that person again and ask them about what their insight was, or if it's your own insight, you know,
Yeah.
even more so.
Yeah.
That it's not like you can just like get it back like easily.
Right. Okay. That's definitely true. That's a good approach that we should explore. I had a different approach based on your other approach, which is there's two things. There's chachma, which is going to be a particular idea, and then there's tivuna, which is a way of thinking about something. You know, like an entire perspective, framework, overarching theory, and that quality, I think, registers differently in the mind than other types of knowledge, and it doesn't matter whether you came up with it or someone else provided it for you. You know, like let's say, for example, I mean, just to give examples of this, like let's say, like there's Shlomo HaMelech, right? Is that Shlomo HaMelech is giving us a derech of thinking about decisions mishleically. That I would say is tivuna, because it's not you get it through particular ideas, but then once you have it, it's a certain orientation towards making decisions that like is greater than the sum of its parts. Or let's say another example of this is, Socrates has a bunch of discussions with his students, but then the Socratic way of thinking, or the Socratic, I mean, it's not just the dialogue, but it's really the Socratic way of thinking is a derech of tavuna, and like, it doesn't matter whether you're Socrates and you came up with that, or whether you're Plato and you received it from your Rebbe. It abides in the mind in a different way than other stuff. So the question then is that somehow more connected to Middos, to the acquisition of good Middos, than a particular idea? Because like a particular, I think this is also what made me think of what you were saying. A particular idea will only go so far as far as its own parameters. You can't apply it, by definition, you can't apply it beyond that particular. But if you have a derech of thinking about something, so then it can refer to many, many different circumstances. And maybe that's what it means by shomer yishmerin v'yasim hadavar alibo v'yishkot azachiras lohotzio el hamasehu. In other words, just for an easy example, like if you have a particular strategy for, not a particular strategy, a particular like practical idea, so then you don't really need to engage in this vigilance. It's just that when the situation comes up, now you know how to do it. But if it's a way of thinking about stuff, and this could pertain to innumerable particulars, then there does need to be a certain type of vigilance where you're on the lookout for opportunities to employ this idea.
And why is this tavuna? It's
tavuna because it is beyond the particulars. Mm-hmm. It's a universal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's a derived universal.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
So
I'll come up with an example in a second. Yeah.
This might be going in the reverse direction.
Yeah.
But I think guarding tavuna in this type of way affects a person's middos, because like just by because it's a true idea and it's reflecting a truth about the greater reality. I think it'll have an impact on a person's middos. Like let's say like statistical thinking.
Yeah.
So then when a person encounters something that like, let's say, so it feels like something like very bad and unfair happened, mm-hmm. then like a person who employs statistical thinking will pause and say, like, is it like they'll pause and to think about it in the framework of like the broader reality of like what's happening, and like about how like all the times that they've like had situations like this that didn't happen, and then like let's say like that'll like give them perspective for like thinking about it. Mm-hmm. And it's not because the person is necessarily more perfected. It's just because it's not that they it's causing them to be more reflective in that area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that brings up a point that I did see in my explorations of Rabbeinu Yonah this morning when he's talking about Middos, is that I believe when Rabbeinu Yonah talks about Middos and Mishlei, he does not mean only ethical Middos. He means also intellectual Middos, like the statistical thinking thing. So that that could fit. I just wanted to mention that because it broadens it. Here's an example: is that like if this were a normal year, then I would be giving my I give a how to survive midterms crash course for ninth graders in my study skills class. And so like one of the main principles that I talk about is that people have this mistake where they think that that the more hours you study, then the better results you're going to get. And really, that's not a good way of thinking about it, because what really matters is the quality of focus and work during those hours. And that if you like, let's say you set aside like 6 hours to study something, so you might be productive in the first and second hour, and then your productivity is going to drop off, and you're just going to be like, not being efficient. So you're better off working in short bursts and then recharging or switching topics or something like that, So there will always be ninth graders in this thing every year that this happens. There'll be ninth graders who will, there will be ones who don't apply it at all. There'll be the ones who apply it in the framework of tests, like or in the framework of papers. And they'll be like, oh, well, I have a test coming up. Rabbi Shnei says it is better to study for a little while, then take a break and recharge, and then come back and study. But then there will be others who will realize, oh, this is like a derech of how to approach work in general. Like this could apply to my learning, this could apply to my life, this is like, it's a derech in efficiency, and so the ones who are thinking about it in the particularized sense, that's not going to change their middos. It'll change the particular, it'll improve, it'll get them success in the particular areas, This is starting to sound very similar to your whole approach. But if they guard that mentality, if they guard the universal that emerges from that, then, and they're on the lookout for opportunities to use it, so then that will cause them to find good. The thing I am not explaining is how to cause them to acquire middos. I mean, I agree with what you just said, that this will lead to middos, because you're not just like applying what other people say. I can't put it into words. I can't get it clear at this second.
Because you're not, because in order to take like the broad framework, you have to think about what the actual phenomenon is.
Yeah.
And then when you do that, you're going to end up reflecting about like the bigger picture, and how it fits into the bigger picture, and then it'll help give you perspective. Yeah,
I still feel like the middos thing is artificial. Like I feel like it's artificial. Like I get everything you just said, but Rabbeinu Yonah saying, and that's the key to good middos. I still feel I'm not getting that point.
Yeah. You did say middos means something broader than maybe not like ethical middos.
Yeah.
But like in terms of your like the way that you relate to like the world around you.
Yeah.
In terms of like I don't know, like not jumping to conclusions as quickly.
Yeah. So maybe the good word to substitute for middos here, because I think we think of middos as character traits, but I think maybe patterns of behavior and thinking would be a good way to frame middos, because that's what middos are, right? I mean, for me, arba middos b'talmidim, arba middos b'holchei beis midrash, they're patterns of thinking, and so you won't succeed in establishing a pattern through just a singular particularized application of an idea, but Tvuna is the key to establishing good patterns, because you're broadening it past the particular, and you're practicing looking at the world through that framework, and that will establish like these patterns.
So you're doing Tvuna on a piece of chachma that you received?
Yeah. Yeah, that's all my understanding is all Tvuna really has to be from start with chachma.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think of an example for magic, because I'm sure there's like.
Well, I mean, here's a good example that even non-magic players can relate to. So there's a piece of advice that I was given by my magic rebbes, a while ago, which is when you lose a game, okay, so you draw a card every game, right? Like not every game, every turn, So when you lose a game, there will be people who will look at the next card they would have drawn, okay, and they'll either be like, "Oh man, like I could have won," or like, "Oh, I wouldn't have won anyway," But what that does is that reinforces bad habits, because it's focusing. First of all, it's distracting you from focusing on things that you actually were making decisions about, and it's allowing you to deflect the painful process of self-tochacha and like evaluation of your own gameplay. But if you can just brush off by saying, "Oh, I would have won the next turn anyway," you just don't look at any of your decisions, and if you say, "Well, I couldn't have done anything anyway," same thing. It's all like just excuses for turning away, and so they're trying to establish. So that was a particular piece of advice. Don't look at the next card. you know. But the tavuna that it instills is a way of relating to all of your gameplay in general and your managing of your own development as a player, you know. And like there are other things that fall into that particular category that don't just involve like, you know, turning over the next card, like certain types of like, let's say, for example, complaining to your friend about how you just lost. That also doesn't further your development as a player, and it makes you anchored in the past and helps you to fabricate excuses for why you didn't do anything like that, you know. Or let's say like, you know, another area that this pertains to is like, you'll find that this is probably true in sports also, but like the real experts, when they're in a very high stakes game, will relate to it exactly as any other game, like as a casual game. Why? Because it's not going to change your decisions. Like, you know, so like it's a particular piece of advice that really encapsulates a whole way of relating to your gameplay, which is focusing on things in your control, not getting caught up in things that deflect you from improving as a player through self-analysis, all this other stuff, you know. And like you have to guard that in order to establish these patterns beyond just that particular. Is that a good example? Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's also Rabbeinu Yonah, right? I think that's that explains it. So Koni Lev Ohev Nafsho, one who acquires good middos loves his soul, meaning this will help improve your intellect. Okay, but how do you do that? Shomer Tavuna Lasos Tov, Limto Tov. You have to guard the universal insights that you obtain, whether through your own thinking or whether through someone else, and be on the lookout for opportunities lahotzio el hamasehu, to apply it, and only through that type of vigilance for opportunities to apply these universal ideas, that's how you're going to establish these patterns of good decision-making behavior that's in ethical middos, or good like analytical behavior, or you know, which is in your learning. And that's the route to obtaining good middos, because you can't develop good middos, or not, you can't. It's very hard to develop good middos just by implementing particular strategies. You know, like for example, like sometimes that could be a starting point. Like for example, a little kid, you train the little kid to say thank you, and like maybe that will get them to be a grateful person. But really, gratitude is a perspective, you know, and saying thank you is just the behavior that emerges from it. So like you can force a kid to say thank you, thank you, thank you. That's not necessarily going to lead to the midah of gratitude, you know. But a recognition of like, you know, let's say the fact that people don't owe you anything, or the fact that like, you know, someone who has a good that someone else doesn't have can either choose to share it or not. Like there's certain perspectives that if you keep in mind, and then the world that you perceive is filtered through those perspectives, that is really what's going to instill gratitude, or the good midah.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
So being shomer the tuna, that's like, it's like abstracting the universal and then bringing it down to particulars. Yeah, or keeping it on your sites to look for particulars. Okay. Yeah, for particulars that are different than the one that it started with. Right. Yeah. And Kone Lev, what was that again? He's just saying Kone Lev is acquiring good middos. Okay. Yeah. One who acquires good middos loves his soul, meaning that it's going to be good for his nefesh. Okay. And that I don't think he's explaining here. I think that's his premise from elsewhere, that like middos are necessary for like your chachma or whatever. Okay. Yeah. Okay, good. What? Why is that? Why are middos good for your? That's what I'm saying. Is like that we could take like a several day detour and look at that. I mean, it's an interesting topic and it's very related to Mishlei, but that's not a quick answer. Yeah. And if we want to do that, there's some Rabbeinu Yonahs I want to do, but then I do want to look at those Mishnayos and Pirkei Avos, you know, to see that. Yeah. All right, let's stop here, and then I want to talk about deduction and induction. Yes. I'll record it. Why not? You know. Okay. So in my English class, I was talking about deduction and induction.
and I was saying like the pros and cons of each, so one pro of deduction is that it's certain, right? So if all men are mortal and if Socrates is man, then 100% Socrates is mortal. Okay, and that's the advantage of deductive. Whereas inductive, you can never have anything with certainty. It's always to a certain degree of probability, or there are weaker and stronger conclusions. Okay, so then my students said, it's very nice to say that that the deductive arguments have an advantage in that they're certain, but since the premises of the deductive arguments are ultimately either all or usually going to come down to inductive arguments, then practically speaking, the certainty doesn't matter. So for example, all men are mortal. Yeah, if that were 100% certain, then you get like the result, but you only know that all men are mortal because you're assuming that about all the men that you've seen. But then all it takes is one Eliyahu or one vampire, and that's it, or one Voldemort, So practically speaking, like, why are you touting this as an advantage of saying that the deductive arguments are more certain? So I still feel like I have a point, but I did not have it clear, and I thought that was a good question.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, not all premises come from induction. Like you could have a premise that's just like
an axiom.
Yeah. Like
that's true, right? Yeah, it's just that those are very few. Meaning that that in most deductive arguments, 99% of deductive arguments you make are not relying on on self-evident truths as their premises.
Well, I'd say when you have a deductive argument, you can say, like, I'm taking as a premise X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
So X, Y, and Z are theoretically debatable because they're inductive.
Yeah.
But given that the other person accepts those premises, then now you have an ironclad argument.
Right. So maybe yeah.
It's like the in terms of, let's say, having a discussion with someone, if you're making an inductive argument, they can just say they don't agree with your induction.
Right.
If you're making a deductive argument from a given set of principles,
yeah.
If they have to either say, I don't agree with one of those premises,
yeah,
or they have to accept it.
Yeah. Okay. That's a really good way to put it, and that pairs well with the other point I was thinking, which is that the strength of a deductive argument is that, like, you are essentially, you've paved the path for the argument already, and then all it takes is a mutual agreement on the premises, and then the argument follows. Like, it just follows of necessity. So you don't actually have to make the argument in the same way that you would have to, like, convince someone of a svara by, like, when you're trying to make an inductive argument to someone, you basically, like, line up all the data, and, like, and then it basically, like, the process of convincing is like, you see it, like, there's no actual, like, whereas the deductive, the machinery for arriving at the conclusion from the premises is built into every human mind. So you have to do is just feed in the right info that both of them agree on, and then you got your argument. Yeah.
Because within inductive argument, if a person doesn't like the conclusion, they can say, they can, like, slip out of it by just saying,
intuitively it's not
yeah. Yeah, they don't need to come up with a structured,
right,
like, disagreement.
Yeah.
But then assuming you're building your deductive argument from premises that they don't want to disagree with.
Yeah.
And that's then I don't have a good example on it, but let's say that, they don't want to make their case be about that not all men are mortal.
Yeah.
Like, then because they know they're going to have a very hard time justifying that both to you and to themselves.
Yeah.
So then they're put in a position where now they have to accept it.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. That's a good way to put it. And you can see why this relates to the Shomer Tuna thing the first way, right? Is that, like, it requires shmira because induction is a very precarious, process where it's not like ironclad like deductive arguments are. Yeah. All right. Good. Thanks. That was helpful.
I think even when you're not having a conversation, even for yourself,